Hi, everybody. Welcome to my fifth episode of Facebook Live series, Time to Grow. So glad that you're joining me today, whether you're here live or you are here as a replay. Either way, I appreciate you being here. I've got a few notes. I'll probably look down at my screen from time to time, so just to let you know. If you are listening live, I'd love for you to say hello. If you feel open to it, you might drop a comment in the comment box just to say who you are and where you're from, and same thing if you're watching it on replay. So welcome to Facebook Live episode, Boundaries, Why Can't I Have Them? You know, I'm going to talk a little bit today about boundaries and why and how they're so essential for having more of a satisfying life, kind of negotiating our world in ways that feel more pleasant, satisfying, and helpful. And so rest assured, if boundaries feel difficult for you, that there's a very good reason why that's the case. Even though boundaries are so important, they're multifaceted kinds of things. And in the places or with the people or the situations where it feels difficult for you to have your boundaries, like I said, there's a very good reason why. Boundaries can be a very big, hairy deal for many, many people. Whether you're someone who can never say no, even in those moments where you feel like you need a no, or you're one of those people on the other end of the spectrum who only says no, either end of the spectrum is a boundary issue. Then here's why. Because in either place, I can't ever say no, even when I know that that's what I need, or I can't ever say anything but no. There's no choice. There's no choice in either place. So there's good reasons why that's the case. And I want to just talk a little bit about boundaries before I get into more of those reasons why. Boundaries, like I said before, they're multifaceted. They have many steps to them, so it's much more complex than just saying, oh, I need to have a boundary with someone. Okay. First of all, there's usually the process of recognizing, even for some people in this moment, that I don't like what's happening. And getting to a place where you can begin to recognize that and listen to that place. Okay, that's kind of the first piece of boundaries, issues and boundary settings. After that then comes the piece of growth around recognizing that, oh, because I know that I don't like what's happening, this might be a good place to have a boundary, and then doing the work in our process to support the experience of having a boundary. Then comes the piece of the process where we have to begin to form and identify what kind of boundary might I need in this situation. Do I need space? Do I need to speak up? So that's kind of a third step in the boundary process, and then doing all the work, like I said, in our own process to be able to support that. And then being able to hold our boundaries, so have the boundary and hold the boundary, that's a whole nother step to the process. And then doing the work in our emotional process around that, and what kind of support we might need internally to be able to hold our boundary. And then moving into some kind of resolution or eventually satisfaction or safety as a result of having your boundary. Very often it's in this step of the boundary issue that people get hit by guilt, or maybe the message they're being mean or too passive, giving in. These negative messages, these internal assaults, these are the things that often prevent someone from even beginning to have that boundary, because once we have a boundary, it is going to activate and energize absolutely anything that our boundaries got met with as a child. And so very often that is why we don't have boundaries when we need to have the boundaries. It's like an unconscious way of managing the uncomfortable or difficult feelings that might come up. And just because you may not remember boundaries being pressured or met with something negative doesn't mean that they weren't. Because if you look at your life now and you say, gosh, this would be a great opportunity for me to have a boundary, or boy, if I could really have a boundary, if I could, just work less, or tell my boss that I don't want to come in on the weekend, or say no to my friend, or whatever it might be, we live a more satisfying life. That's it. So not having boundaries, holding against the places where we need to have a boundary, is a form of safety and protection. And none of that is conscious. So just because you're not aware that you might need emotional safety inside, doesn't mean that you don't. It's like computer software, computer virus software on our computers, right? It's kind of always running in the background, or at least it used to work that way, where it'd be always running in the background. We wouldn't remember that it was even there. We'd installed it on our computers until a virus came in, and then we got some message about how it's been quarantined and all of that, and we go, whew, I'm glad I had that virus software on my computer. It's kind of the same thing. We are always in the background in an unconscious place, attempting to create, or at least find a balance between emotional safety and satisfaction in the world around us. And depending on where we're at in our process, we either have more supports to find satisfaction in a way that also helps us feel safe, or we don't. So the scale is always tilting on that. So in the places where it may be difficult for you to have a boundary, that's about managing this balance between satisfaction and emotional safety. And as I said, it's not a conscious process. It's not as simple as saying, well, I'll just have that boundary. Because once we begin to have a boundary, or a different kind of boundary, it is, like I said, it is going to open up all the internal assaults, all the energy we got met with as children around the support for our boundaries. Okay, so someone asked in the group about boundaries, and they also asked about self-esteem and how those two pieces are connected. Well, when you think about this again, you're going back to childhood and thinking about the way boundaries start. When we think about toddlers, and unfortunately that time period often gets called the terrible twos, right? I kind of cringe at that a lot, because it's a disparaging description of that time frame, primarily based on the frustration and discomfort that parents have when their children have their nose, in some part. And don't get me wrong, it is frustrating as a parent sometimes to bump into that and need to have your boundaries and all of that. But that's about your childhood. So anyway, back to development. You think about toddlers and little young babies and kids. They go through this period of no, this period of forming their no, early on in life, because this is the beginning of developing a self. We're always developing a self, but this is a critical part of developing more of a self, is being able to have our no, have our protest. In fact, no is a boundary. It's a form of boundary. And no, boundaries, and anger actually are all intertwined. They're all interconnected. When we work on one, or we notice something about one, it's also going to be impacted to these other things. So depending on how our no's were supported or not in childhood is absolutely going to have an impact on our ability to say no, our ability to have a boundary, our ability to feel our anger as adults. So I have an experiment for you in the context of that. You might take some time, whether it's now or later, or ongoing kind of experiment for you, but you might take some time and go back and explore your toddlerhood. How did your no get met? You might ask family members, parents, if they're still alive, or if that feels like it's beyond your supports, you might just think about, how do no's get supported now in your family of origin? Or how do you live your no when you need to have a no or a boundary? Does it feel like it's a place of choice for you? So you can say no when no feels true, you can say yes when yes feels true? Or does it feel like there's hard energy connected to it? Meaning you have to have a very firm or hard no, or a very passive or almost non-existent no. And that's going to tell you a lot about how you got supported emotionally around this experience of having boundaries. And so all of that, folks, is directly connected to esteem. Because when it's safe to have our boundaries, we know we matter. We know someone cares about our well-being. We have esteem because we see it reflected. There's room made for that. And so these pieces are intricately connected. No way to split them apart. So I'm curious to hear how boundaries were for you in your families of origin. Were they met with patience and understanding and compassion and satisfying support? Or were they met with something else that felt unpleasant or dissatisfying? Take a moment and explore that for yourself. And if you have any questions or need any more clarification or discussion around the idea of boundaries, absolutely feel free to reach out. You can directly contact me by email. You can post in the Visual Journaling Facebook group if you're a member of that group. If not, I encourage you to join. You can check us out on Facebook, Visual Journaling, Expanding Your Emotional Intelligence. You can also get to it through my Transformation Facebook homepage as well. So that's my thoughts about boundaries for now. Thanks for listening. And like I said, if you have any questions or want to know any more, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot, and I hope that you guys have a nice week. Bye.